Okay, so to wrap up this series, I just wanted to do a quick review of everything that you should have learned up till now, and then give you some tips on just like practical logistical things. So we started out talking about what a board is and the difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit, and how governance and benefits have to be separated. A business owner can risk and reward and govern. They can earn money. They can draw profit. In a nonprofit, the business owner is the board as far as legal compliance and all of that. They may not benefit personally. They must be serving for the mission of the organization. Okay? We talked about the difference between governance and operational things. Operations is what's literally happening in the day-to-day. That's overseen by the executive director. Operations can be staffed by volunteers or can be staffed by employees, but operations is different than governance, okay? Governance is what the board members do. They're responsible for the 3 duties: duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. Okay, that's their informing philosophy. And they're going to be overseeing compliance, financials, the executive director, who kind of bridges into the operations, and strategic planning, okay? So they need to make sure they understand what is required financially by their state, morally and ethically for their organization. They need to do their due diligence. They need to do their homework in between meetings. They need to show up to meetings. They need to be prepared. And they need to take care of those 4 main areas in board governance meetings, okay? We talked about the officers, the president, the treasurer, the secretary. The president oversees the meetings, keeps things in order. The treasurer is overseeing the finances. They should understand the finances to some extent, have enough knowledge to ask the right questions. And the secretary is responsible for the agenda, for keeping records of things in a neutral place, and for keeping meeting minutes. And I don't think I mentioned, but the other people on the board are non-officers who are voting members of the board. So these are just people who are there, they're discussing, they're contributing, they're voting, but they aren't officers, okay? The officers just have those specific jobs. The executive director or the executive staff can be at board meetings, but as paid employees, they are not formally voting, even though they may contribute a lot and participate a lot and give a lot of input and discussion. They can't actually vote, okay? You can have committees also, they should always have at least 1 board member on them. They can meet in between board meetings, and they can help with they can focus on some of those specific things like compliance or finances in their committee meetings, and then make recommendations back, such as a finance committee going through financials and looking at the budget and how it was built, and then make a recommendation back that the budget is good, and to a recommendation to the annual budget. You could also have like an internal, external sort of committee if you don't have a lot of members and they just deal with some of the internal stuff and some of the external stuff. There's different ways you could do it. The bylaws should outline your governance, okay? So those are the main things you need to know to get started with your board. And just a couple of practical things. When you have a meeting, a board governance meeting, which you can have them, you can decide how often you want to meet. You can meet, if you're just getting started, you might need to meet a couple hours every single month. Once things are off the ground and rolling along pretty well, you can meet, quarterly or every couple of months. But it needs to be often enough that you're able to do your tasks and you have the time to do your tasks. And so what I recommend is having a calendar for the year, and you have a cyclical sort of repeating schedule for the things that have to happen every year, whether that's recruiting new board members and then bringing them on, checking with the taxes that are due at a particular time every year, checking with the state paperwork that's due at a particular time every year, auditing the financials at once a year or whatever, having a strategic planning vision weekend or Saturday or something like that. Just put it on a calendar so that you're repeating the same things, and that's easy to pass along to future board members. Make sure you have board training for your future members. So when you have a meeting, your president should be calling the meeting to order. And that's when the secretary starts typing, okay? That's when the minutes begin. And you should be approving the previous minutes, which is just like an accountability check-in. If there were any action items from the previous meeting, anything that was left open, didn't get finished being discussed or whatever, people have a chance to go back and look at the last meeting minutes, which they should have done before. They should get sent out by the secretary before the meeting. Did you read the meeting minutes? Did you have any questions? Do we accept the meeting minutes from last time? Or if there's like something that wasn't in there, like, oh, well, we talked about this big thing and it's not in the meeting minutes. Like, you should be checking in on that. And then you accept the meeting minutes and then you proceed on, and you should be following an agenda. I'd strongly recommend having a time, prioritizing things by order of importance, but also having a time limit on things. And you should be like, here's what we're talking about. This is the topic. If anyone has to present any information, which should be prepared beforehand, you're not making this up in the meeting. This stuff is all being submitted to the secretary before the meeting to be on the agenda. So everyone is prepared. Everybody knows what their role is. If it's not submitted beforehand, unless it's an emergency that just came up that day or whatever, it shouldn't be discussed in that meeting. It should be submitted for the next meeting or, passed along to a committee or something like that if something came up and there isn't space for it. So honor people's time in the beginning and the end. You call the meeting to order, and then you go start working through your agenda. It can be nice to have kind of a missional moment, to get started, where you share something positive that happened in your mission, somebody you touched or reached out to or whatever, to just help remind people. It really does help, remind people why they're sitting in this boardroom doing all this boarding compliance stuff, to just, hear a story of what's actually the effect you're having on the ground. That can just be a nice thing to start with. But then as you discuss things, it's important that the president keeps order in the meeting, in the sense that if there's someone not speaking or there's someone dominating the conversation or whatever, that they're like, we would like to hear what you have to say. Do you have anything to say about this? Like, call out the person who's not speaking or someone who's domineering to be able to say, look, thanks for your input. We need to hear from other people now. And then it's really important. And I can't tell you how many times I saw this happen. And even in the middle of it, sometimes I wouldn't realize it was happening until afterward. I'd be like, wait a minute, we never voted on that. A discussion goes on and on and on, and you get in the weeds with it, and you have opinions and everything. And then it kind of fizzles, and there's no official vote. So, and it doesn't mean you have to vote on everything, but if there's a decision to be made of any kind, even if the decision is to wait and talk about it later, it's a good idea to say, okay, we're going to take a vote on this. And then someone will say, I make a motion to table this till next time, or I make a motion to accept this proposal, or, appoint this person as executive director, whatever it is you're discussing. And then the president would be like, okay, everyone in favor say aye, that sort of thing. And it could feel kind of formal and weird at first, but just do it or do something similar. And then the secretary should be writing down who is voting and what they're voting. And you should be abiding by your bylaws as far as whether it needs to be a unanimous vote or whatever. If someone is sitting out because of conflict of interest or they're just not comfortable voting on the topic, that should be reported too, okay? And they can do that. They can just say, I'm not voting on this. So you should make sure that is all reported and it's just done decently and in order. And then, at the end of your meeting time, if there's stuff you didn't get to or whatever, make sure that that's written down for the next time or follow up. Make sure you have action items. Who's going to do it? When are they going to do it? If there's research that needs to be done, who's going to research it? When are they going to do it? And just make sure there's accountability for that, and then just keep it all in order. Okay? So those are my recommendations for conducting your board meetings. There is a lot more that you can learn about as far as nonprofits and board meetings and rules of order and fundraising and grants and all of that kind of thing. There's a whole world of it out there. But my mission personally for you was to deliver just the basic outlines of things that I didn't know when I started just a small nonprofit that was fee for service, that was employee staffed, and just gathered some supportive people around to be on the board, but none of us had really been on a board before or really knew what a board was supposed to do. I wanted to be able to be like, well, if I could deliver a training to myself in my first board, 8-9 years ago, what do I wish that I had known to prioritize and work on? And that is what I have told you here. And as you dig into more of these things, you might come across things and say, oh, I didn't, our state requires this or allows this, or, you do a strategic plan and discover that you do need to have a campaign, or you need to, your tuition is going to be too high at your school if you cover all of the costs that you have there, and you need to make fundraising a major thing. Now you need to go out and learn about fundraising or grants and what's involved in that. Maybe hire a grant writer, maybe bring on some people in your board who do have some, community clout and who can make connections with local businesses and get donations, or, just start out with just a little fundraiser that you help with as a board. Okay, so you might dig further into this as you progress and realize that there's more you would like to, you should learn about. Just always remember those 3 duties. You need to be sticking to those principles and be committed to the mission of the organization. And you board members have a really important job. It's a very important job. And your volunteers, you're not getting compensated. You really have to believe in the mission of the organization. But you also have the ability and opportunity to make this nonprofit into something that's highly impactful, that changes a lot of people's lives when you really do your job well for the community and you really support your founder or, whoever the staff are. You really support them well and you do your all your duties well. You can have a lot of impact in your community, which is why your organization exists. Okay. So if you have any questions, check out my website. I have a course on strategic planning, a actual program that's more for founders. But it also takes you through the steps of strategic planning in more depth. And I am working on a little more information for hybrid schools specifically. But even if you're not in any of that, I just hope you benefited from knowing what a board is supposed to do. And let me know if you have any questions or I can help you with anything else.